Welcome to week 4 of Education 310. A quick check-in, just as a quick thank you for all of you guys sending me emails and keeping me up to date on anything that's going on and questions about work assignments, so thank you for that. If there's ever a question that you have and you want to send me an email, please don't hesitate to do that because it may be for the good of the group and something that I need to clarify for the group. So please always know that you can send an email and ask some questions or let me know if there's something going on that I need to be aware of. That being said, I also just want to make a quick note that starting this week, anything that is not turned in, so anything that was due yesterday, Sunday at 11:59, that is not turned in by yesterday at 11:59, will start having the 2 points removed per day as the late point deduction as it explains in your syllabus. So we had some issues with getting our textbooks and things on back order and snow days and everything else when we started. So now that we're getting into week 4, we're really at a point where we should be getting pretty much on a regular routine and on a roll with the assignments and what's expected in that due date. So please know that anything that was due for week 3 yesterday at 11:59 p.m., if it's not turned in when I go in to check on Mondays, then you'll start to get 2 points off for that assignment or whatever work is not turned in. So that includes discussion boards, your interactive notebook points, and things like that. All right, let's jump into week 4. So we are about halfway there, which I know is kind of crazy, but at the same time, you guys have been working hard. So I'm sure on one hand, it probably feels definitely like we're 4 weeks in. So I know that y'all have been working hard. So I'm just going to touch base about a couple of things. Let's first check in on our syllabus so we can see what our learning outcomes are this week and what we'll be working on. Here, let me put this to where it's easier for you guys to see. This one will be fine. All right, so let's skip on down to our week 4. All right, so your learning outcomes this week, you're going to reflect on reliability, validity, and fairness when it comes to assessment. And we'll get a little bit deeper into that when we look at your discussion board. You will apply some of those growth mindset and assessment concepts in the field as you are in classrooms, either for field experience or your day-to-day as TAs. You will extend your thinking from your book studies, both from growth mindset and your classroom assessment book, through your field experiences and your interactive notebooking. So you're making those connections between what you've been reading and what you're seeing. And then also you're starting to carry out some intervention sessions. I've heard from some of you about your topics and the content areas that you are working on. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited to see the growth that your students are making. So we'll also dig in a little bit today into your assessment notebook. So that may be a secondary video just so that it's a resource in and of itself, but that will be also uploaded into this week. So we're going to be looking at our classroom assessment, chapters 3 through 5, working in your interactive notebooks, also working in your field experience and building your assessment notebook, and then your discussion board as well. So let me go ahead and put this to where it looks as though you see it. All right, and then if we go into our weekly content, you should now see week 4 come up in your folders. So the first thing that pops up is your discussion board. So here I want to describe a couple of things. 1, the setup or the protocol, and then 2, what it is. So the protocol that we're using is a Frere model. So hopefully this is something that you've seen in classrooms as TAs, and it's something that your students should be familiar with working with. If not, it's a great resource for you to use when you're working with kids. So once you've read chapters 4, 5, and 6 in your classroom assessment book, I want you to reflect and respond to each of these Frere model protocols. So chapter 4 is about reliability, chapter 5 is about validity, and chapter 6 is about fairness. So each of these has its own Frere model. So this right here is the Frere model, and it's basically just an organizer that helps students to define difficult vocabulary or maybe help to wrap their brain around a difficult concept by dissecting it and pulling apart and looking at kind of the components that make it up. So you will be doing that based on what you're reading in chapters 4, 5, and 6. So you can do this a couple of ways. One, you can either create your own Frere model, and to be honest, all you have to do is Google Frere model, and usable, changeable, interactive templates will come up that you are welcome to create your own, and then you can actually take a screenshot and upload that into your discussion board, so you're welcome to do that. Or you can follow just this outline type protocol. So a Frere model, as I said, breaks down the content so it helps us to understand what it is. And when it comes to assessment, the concepts of reliability, validity, and fairness are not always the easiest to understand, and especially as elementary teachers, most of us are, but even middle and secondary. Validity and reliability in assessments is not something that regularly comes across our desk, and it's not something that we normally have to have conversations around. So that's why I want us to be able to break those down. So whether you choose to do it in this model or in an outline model, you're breaking down the concept of reliability in assessment by defining it, by providing some additional facts or information about it, by giving examples and non-examples. So for you, with reliability and validity and fairness, and with your students, if you're using a Frere model with your students, it's a way for them to know exactly what it is and what it is not. So by defining it, giving facts and information about it, and finding examples or creating examples, you are creating more and more evidence and embedding more and more information in your brain about what reliability is, versus if you're just kind of telling students or having them define words out of a dictionary. Then by providing a non-example, it just kind of helps anchor that, that thought about what reliability is or what that concept is, because then they're able to say, I know reliability is, and I know reliability is not. And so by doing this Frere model, it should help you guys more easily understand reliability, validity, and fairness as it comes to assessment. So again, you can choose to upload and put your information into the Frere models itself, or you can choose to do this outline version. But for each of them, reliability and validity and fairness, you are writing the definition, the facts and information, even just one or two things is fine, non-examples and examples. Then, where the discussion board will probably most catch on when you're posting and reposting is going to be this connection piece here. Now, this connection piece is not a part of the Frere model, but it's something that I want us to start thinking about as we're in schools. So in your experiences, either as TAs or as you've been in schools to observe in field experiences, how does this connect? Does it connect at all? Do you know if classroom assessments have been built to be reliable or valid or fair? And so I want you to make that connection. Most likely, again, that's where our conversation will happen with our discussion board as we repost and respond to each other. But I want us to take a minute and really understand the importance of assessments being reliable and valid and fair for our students in our classrooms. And while we can't always make sure that all of our unit assessments and chapter assessments and things like that have the highest percentage of reliability and validity, it is something we need to just keep in mind. And it's one of those things that if we keep that in mind, it will help us to create better tests when we are creating them, because we have that, remember, in the back of my mind, it needs to be reliable. So it needs to be consistent, that it's measuring what it's supposed to be measuring over time. So that's important to consider. So the more that we understand this, the more we will kind of by habit create better tests. So make sure you're taking a moment when you're reading. I know chapters 4, 5, and 6 are not, especially 4 and 5, are a little bit difficult. It's a little content heavy because it's digging into what is reliability and validity. But dig in and get through the chapter. There is some relief at the end of each chapter where it digests kind of how does this apply to me as a classroom teacher. But just know overall that reliability is the consistency of the test measuring whatever it's supposed to measure. So over time, if you have a test that's supposed to be measuring fluency with sight words, is that really what your test is measuring? Or if it's something where you're supposed to be measuring fluency in math facts, multiplication or subtraction or addition, whatever it may be. Is your assessment reliable over time in that it is consistently measuring whatever it's supposed to measure? And then when you think about validity, is it measuring what you want it to measure? So reliability is the overtime factor. Does it continue to measure what it's supposed to be measuring? And is it something that you can kind of predict patterns and base trends and data on? Validity is more of, is your assessment testing what you want it to test? So by your interpretation of the results, are you finding that students are able to understand the content? Did your assessment accurately assess their understanding of the content? So it's not necessarily that the test itself is a valid test. It's in the process of your interpretation of the results. And the book will go into that more in detail, but just so you have kind of a general thought of where that's coming from. Then I also want you in Chapter 6 to take a good look at assessment bias. So it's important to know when we're creating tests, if we have any kind of subconscious assessment bias, we need to be aware of the students that are in our classroom. So this can also be very relevant to standardized tests, EOGs, benchmarks, things like that that are happening in our classrooms. And if we just kind of step back for a minute and look at our assessments, is there a gender bias, a race bias, ethnicity, low income or socioeconomic status bias, religion, or any other kind of defining characteristic that a person may have? Do we have assessments that our students are taking that are creating this bias, or that have a bias that would prevent them from scoring well or achieving at high levels? So there is a lot of debate out there about standardized testing in particular, national standardized tests or statewide standardized tests, and having assessment bias as they are built and as the students are taking them. So make that connection also, and see if that's something that might be happening in your schools or in the state of North Carolina with our state testing guidelines and the tests that our students are taking. So you're going to be reading chapters 3 through 5, completing the discussion board. Chapters 4 through 6, completing the discussion board. And then you're also going to be completing your interactive notebook notes page reflection. You will be completing that for each of your chapters as well. Finally, I just want to remind you here, I have an assessment notebook resource, and that is something that I'm going to dig into in the next video coming up. But just so you can see, I've uploaded some resources here as we start to build our assessment notebook. I will also, later this week, towards the middle of the week, be uploading a template of like a Google spreadsheet that you can use for your assessment notebook. So know that that will be happening too. So please take a minute and make sure that we digest all of the information from this week, because we really want to make sure that as teachers we are creating the best assessment process. So in using our assessment notebooks and resources, and that we are building the best assessments for our kids, and that we're not creating assessment bias, keyword, key response, assessment bias when we're writing those assessments, and that we're at least aware of assessment bias that may be present on standardized tests that we don't have control over, but that we're aware that it may be there. All right, so your reading, notebook pages, your field experience work, and discussion board is what you have going on this week. So another video will follow where we dig in a little bit with your assessment notebook itself. And if you have any questions, please always ask. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great 4th week of class.